Imagine, it's the early 20th century, a time of heroic exploration. The world map had been almost entirely filled in, but one final prize remained unconquered: the South Pole. This desolate, icy wilderness became the stage for one of history's most dramatic and ultimately tragic races. Two men, from two different nations, with two vastly different approaches, set their sights on being the first human to stand at the bottom of the world. From Norway, we have Roald Amundsen. A meticulous, seasoned polar explorer, Amundsen was the ultimate pragmatist. He had spent years living with the Inuit, learning their survival techniques, mastering the art of dog sledding, and understanding the brutal logic of the ice. His plan was a masterpiece of efficiency. He laid out supply depots with almost military precision, calculating every calorie, every mile. For Amundsen, this wasn't about romance. It was about succeeding through superior preparation and respect for the unforgiving environment. He chose the shortest, most direct route, and his team was a small, highly skilled unit, unified in their purpose. His rival was the British Royal Navy officer, Captain Robert Falcon Scott. Scott embodied the spirit of the British Empire, brave, determined, and perhaps a little bound by tradition. His expedition was larger, more scientifically focused, and relied on a mix of transport methods: dogs, Siberian ponies, and even experimental motorized sledges. Scott's approach was one of brute force and stoic endurance. He saw the journey as a test of human spirit against the elements. Unlike Amundsen's focused dash, Scott's expedition was burdened by a sense of national pride and the pressure to conduct scientific research along the way. The race began in late 1911. Amundsen's team, gliding swiftly on skis behind their expertly handled dog teams, made incredible progress. The dogs were not just transport, they were a core part of his strategy. They were perfectly adapted to the cold, and as the journey progressed and loads lightened, weaker dogs were used to feed the stronger ones and the men themselves. A grim but brutally effective calculation for survival in a place with no other resources. They moved like a well-oiled machine across the polar plateau. Meanwhile, Scott's team struggled. The motorized sledges failed almost immediately in the extreme cold. The ponies, unsuited for the deep snow and frigid temperatures, couldn't cope and had to be put down far earlier than planned, leaving the men to haul their own heavy sledges. This man-hauling, as it was called, was exhausting, soul-crushing work. They were burning thousands of calories a day, inching their way across the vast, featureless landscape, their progress painfully slow compared to the Norwegians. On December 14, 1911, Roald Amundsen and his 4 companions arrived at the South Pole. They planted the Norwegian flag, left a tent with a letter for Scott, and after a brief stay, began their return journey. Their meticulous planning had paid off. They had reached their goal, and their return was just as efficient as their approach. 34 days later, on January 17, 1912, Scott's exhausted party finally reached the pole. But instead of triumph, they found crushing disappointment. There, fluttering in the polar wind, was the Norwegian flag. The sight was devastating. Scott wrote in his diary, "The pole, yes, but under very different circumstances from those expected. Great God! This is an awful place and terrible enough for us to have labored to it without the reward of priority." Their race was lost. Now, a new, more desperate struggle began, the race for survival. Weakened, frost-bitten, and with dwindling supplies, their 800-mile journey back became a nightmare. The weather turned against them with unusual ferocity. One man, Edgar Evans, died after a fall. Another, Captain Oates, suffering from severe frostbite and knowing he was slowing the team down, famously walked out of the tent into a blizzard, saying, "I am just going outside and maybe some time." He sacrificed himself in a vain attempt to save his friends. The remaining 3, Scott, Wilson, and Bowers, pushed on, but were finally trapped by a relentless blizzard just 11 miles from their next supply depot. Frozen and starving, they died in their tent. Their final diary entries tell a story not of failure, but of incredible courage and endurance against impossible odds. So, who truly won? Amundsen claimed the prize, a victory of planning and efficiency, but Scott's tragic story, captured in his diaries found months later, transformed him into a national hero, a symbol of noble, courageous failure. The race to the South Pole remains a powerful, timeless saga of ambition, strategy, and the indomitable yet fragile human spirit. Thanks for watching. If you found this story as fascinating as I do, please hit that like button and subscribe for more journeys into history. See you next time.